ending the sale of petrol and diesel cars by 2027 to make way for electric vehicles. It's a headline that attracts attention, to say the least. However, this came out in a report that was just released a couple of days ago. A lot of people have been talking about it, so today we're going to dive into this report. We'll talk about some of the findings and the numbers surrounding this discussion, and then of course we'll talk about what it means for the EV revolution moving forward. So to start off with, where did this report come from? It came out of Committee for Sydney. It's a think tank that's made up of a range of leading infrastructure experts as well as business leaders. As you can see, they're the city's peak advocacy and urban policy think tank, and they discuss a range of different topics. It's not only electric vehicles, decarbonisation, it goes from labour shortages to places, to the floods and the census. However, just recently, the Committee for Sydney released their new report. This was released on Monday and it's called Decarbonising Sydney. Of course, we're all familiar with the global discussion surrounding decarbonisation and the clean energy trend. It's not only isolated to Australia or one region. However, I thought it was worth diving into this discussion from the Committee of Sydney because it gives us a bit of an insight into how some of the leading minds in the space are thinking about this transition and what are some of those key drivers and factors that we all should be thinking. And so in terms of key drivers, the Committee for Sydney see a misalignment between the broader state objectives from the New South Wales government and then how the greater Sydney region is actually tracking. So the New South Wales government itself has an objective to achieve net zero by 2050, but by 2030 to reach 50% emissions reduction from the 2005 levels. However, the research from this report states that despite New South Wales climate policies leading the nation, Sydney is not on track to do its fair share in meeting the state's 2030 or 2050 net zero targets, which is the driver behind this Decarbonising Sydney report. As you can see here, modelling the current steady transition trajectory, so that's the base case, if nothing changes, Sydney's emissions will fall by 43% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. And just for contextual understanding, Sydney's emissions comprise around about a third, or just over a third, 36% of all of New South Wales emissions. So as a result of that, the Committee for Sydney have put forward an accelerated net zero transition pathway with a few different ideas about how we could get towards that. If you've read this report, I'd love to know your thoughts, so drop in a comment below what you made of it and what you think it means for the electric vehicle transition moving forward. So in terms of how we're tracking at the moment, as we can see here, historical emissions have ebbed, they've flowed. The trend from 2005 to 2019 has been one line, but we need to accelerate this transition if we want to meet the 2030 and then ultimately net zero targets by 2050. And so we can see this here in terms of just using a straight line moving forward. In terms of how to achieve it, the Committee for Sydney have put forward a range of different initiatives, but ultimately they're comprising two key pillars surrounding buildings as well as transport. As you can see here, this is the Greater Sydney emission, so this is not broader New South Wales, this is Greater Sydney itself. As you can see here on the steady transition, so the base case on the right there, you can see industry, buildings and then transport make up the three significant areas for reduction moving forward to 2030. But with the accelerated net zero transition, with some of these initiatives they've put forward, we can see that the Greater Sydney emissions could reduce by 3 million tonnes there on the transport side and an additional 1 million tonnes as well on the industry side as well. So these are the opportunities that the Committee for Sydney are hoping to put forward through this report. In terms of why EVs matter, we saw the makeup there just previously with that visual, but you can see here, transport in terms of emissions in Greater Sydney is a key component of it. And not only is transport a key component, but passenger vehicles is a significant component as well, nearly around about half of the transport emissions in Greater Sydney in terms of 2020. Just breaking down some of the numbers here, transport's the largest source of emissions after the power grid itself. In terms of the 18 million tonnes, road transport accounts for 88%. Sydney trains are already electric. New South Wales buses are transitioning towards an electric fleet. There's opportunities for air travel to decarbonise already. So a lot of those low-hanging fruits and easy wins have been accounted for. And so as a result of that, the Committee for Sydney have put forward a few different initiatives. From now until 2030, faster adoption of electric vehicles is needed for Sydney to be on track to meet emissions reduction targets. After 2030, the conversion of light and heavy trucks will accelerate as more models become available, but obviously that's not going to be in the near term at commercial scale. They've stated that if the electric vehicles carry the vast bulk of achieving the 2030 target, then 100% of passenger car sales will need to be EVs in 2027. This is leading to approximately 850,000 passenger EVs on the road by 2030. though they've stated that current market conditions make this highly unlikely. So they're not saying that this has to be done. This is obviously not policy ready to be legislated, but this is their suggestions about how we could accelerate the transition to get closer towards a 2030 50% target and then net zero by 2050 in Sydney. But they've highlighted it quite clearly here. Enabling faster adoption requires an integrated range of policies, subsidies and awareness campaigns, as well as regulations that favour EVs. This is not just one single decision that can be made and bang, they've been rolled out. You need a coordinated approach with integrated support from a government level as well as a corporate level and ultimately consumer adoption. And that's what I've highlighted here. They've stated that along the lines of fuel efficiency standards like we've seen in California and phasing out of petrol and diesel vehicles like in the UK and Europe. And we've seen that coming through. And it's not only Sydney itself. We saw the Inflation Reduction Act recently getting a lot of discussion over in the United States. This is the largest single climate change investment, over $300 billion worth earmarked by the Biden government for that. Of course, they're trying to get towards a 50% below 2005 level for 2030 as well. Obviously, that's an aspirational target. There's a range of things that need to be changed. But we know what we can see at the moment is that it's not only Sydney, it's not only America, we're starting to see this coordinated response. We know the electric vehicle rollout started significantly in China, then Europe was a rapid adopter as well, but we're starting to see other nations and regions picking up pace. And now we're seeing here that the electric vehicle revolution is arriving. First and foremost, before we conclude, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe and turn your bell notifications on. Plenty of videos across the electric vehicle supply chain that you can check out after this one. We are seeing that there's a lot more discussion in the space now. Not only is electric vehicles a great idea and something that could potentially be good in the future, we're seeing that it's in the here and now, and governments are willing to do what it takes to really lead this adoption. Obviously, transport is a significant contributor to emissions in this current time, and we see the opportunity. Of course, we know there's elevated prices for the commodities, and we need to see the prices of the electric vehicles themselves come down so that more consumers can adopt them. Governments have the ability to feed into that with incentives and subsidies. Obviously, regulations and mandates about when phase-outs will come will help to accelerate that transition. We're seeing the investment coming in from automakers as well. So it's going to be fascinating to see where this story ends. Drop in a comment below, let us know where you think it heads from here. Check out another video after this one. A big thank you for joining us. For now, stay well and happy investing.